This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds.
Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by AWS. Amazon Q Business is the generative AI assistant that can securely understand your business data, summarize results, and streamline tasks. Learn what Amazon Q Business can do for you at aws.com/learn more.
You are now listening to the Dynasty Rewind.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Dynasty Rewind. I'm your host, Michael Bauer, the best in the business. Once again, back in business. Joined as always by my co-host, Nate the Professor Christian. Nate, hello and welcome back.
Hello, Mike. Thanks for having me. As always, it is almost Christmas, and you know what I want more than anything for Christmas?
Ravens Super Bowl?
That would be great. I wouldn't be able to get that by Christmas, but that would be a great late Christmas present. But actually, even more than that is if everyone who listened and watched, liked and subscribed on YouTube, on whatever podcast they listen to, whatever podcast app they listen to, I would appreciate that so much. Totally free for you. Doesn't cost you a penny. Takes about 5 seconds of your time and helps us out so much.
That would be awesome if you guys could do that. You know, drop a comment. If you listen on Spotify, you could leave comments on there now too, which I think is a pretty cool thing to do. Because a lot of people digest this through their ears and not just their eyes. But to everybody on YouTube, hello, thank you for watching. And hey, if you're a pod only listener, head on over to our YouTube. Give that a like as well. Give that a subscribe. Throughout the off season, there's going to be things on there that aren't going to come up on the RSS feed. If you want even more of us, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind, giving you a week for free. So come and check it out. But Nate, you know what? It's that time of year. You're either in the playoffs or you're not. Before we get into that, how did you do this week? I was either first round bye in the playoffs, had a couple games. Hats off to one of our contributors, Sean. He did eliminate me from the playoffs in one league. In another league, I'm going to play him next week. So we're going to have some redemption. Either had first round bye, won one, lost one, or I did have a couple first-round toilet bowl buys. But how did you do in the playoffs, Nate?
I actually beat Sean in round one of the playoffs in one of our leagues. So I counted it all up. I'm in 15 Dynasty leagues. I made playoff in 12 of them. Nice. So 80%. It's pretty good. Of my 12 playoff teams, 6 had a bye. The other 6 were playing, and I went 3 for 3 this week.
Nice. All right. Good for you, man. But before we get started on our strategy sesh right here, I have a question because this is kind of a debated topic here. What are your thoughts on the toilet bowl? You know, it's one of those things where if you had a bad year and let's say you're tanking, like in our C2C league, Bob, he's like, I'm straight up tanking. I got a lot of, and he does have a really good team on his C2C side. So he's going to have a lot of great players coming over. I think as soon as next year, his team's going to be scary, personally. He's like, I'm going to tank this here. So if he's tanking, specifically tanking, okay, and now he has to try to win in the toilet bowl for the 101, it kind of skews your strategy. So what are your thoughts on the toilet bowl? I don't really care for it, whatever. Or how do we do it? Like the playoffs team, they basically fight for what, 12 through 7, those picks. Yep. And then you to set it up where 1 through 6 are projected points, or how do we do that?
So in all the leagues that I commish, which is a couple, I always do max points for. Okay. And I love that because it doesn't rely on how people set their lineups. Someone can't tank because the only way you can tank is by trading away good talent. And that is a reasonable way to tank because then it, helps other teams. It helps, them be competitive at the top. And, you're not just tanking 1 year to have a really good team the next year. So I like going with max points for my 1 through 6. And then, of course, playoff standings at the end of the year for the 107 through 112. Now, when it comes to like a toilet bowl or a consolation bracket, I don't currently have a prize in the leagues that I commission, but I am all about if you want to take the time to figure out a way to set it up where you give the winner of the consolation bracket like the 213 or something like that to get like an extra pick in there. I'm fine with that. I think that's actually really fun and keeps people interested through the end of the season because I know in the couple of leagues where I'm not in playoffs, I'm not even really looking at my lineups right now.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about the consolation bracket, not worried about the toilet bowl because all my leagues are based on points for, max points for. So, it would be fun to keep people into it. I need Sleeper to give me the option to add a 213 as the winner for the consolation bracket, though.
Yeah. The cool thing about Sleeper is I feel like they are the one fantasy football platform that really listens to their users. Like my fantasy league, super outdated unless you spend the time customizing it. But look, not everybody's good at stuff like that. Admittedly, Sleeper has a good user interface on the phone, not as good on the computer. But look, they were made to be for mobile users. And there's other ones, ESPN, Yahoo, kind of outdated. If anyone uses Flea Flicker, drop a comment below, drop a comment on Spotify, whatever. I would just be curious about that. But today we're talking about, you're not in the playoffs. How are you rebuilding? There's a lot of ways to do it. So let's talk about how to do it the right way. We got a couple strategies for you guys and a couple players to target. So Nate, what is your first strategy?
All right. My first strategy is you got to take shots on low valued players. If you're a rebuilding team, you have the ability to take some shots. And if you miss, it's okay. It's not going to make or break your team because you're going to rebuild. You're going to need more than just one piece to be able to get to where you want to be. So with that, you're looking for low cost, high reward players because this can be the ticket to quickening your rebuild. It can, sometimes it's just little things where like, hey, you get something that's worth the 3rd round pick and you flip it for a 2nd round pick. And that just helps your overall assets as you continue to grow your team. Sometimes you get lucky. You draft Puka Nacua in the 4th round, and then you can sell him for 2 firsts and another wide receiver at some point. So there's a wide range, but we can't always get the Puka Nacuas of the world. So it's about, the little things, about getting those players that are a little undervalued, and you see opportunities for them in the future. Whether it's just the depth chart and how it's looking, maybe there's some players that are injury prone ahead of them. Maybe there's some contract situations that are coming up, some impending free agents. You got to take a look at the future of these players and try to be a step up ahead because you're not worried about points this year. So you are able to kind of take all of your value for these players on future value, not necessarily on present value. And that's the way that as a rebuilding team, you can quote unquote win trades that, the competing team might be winning it for their purposes, but you can still win trades for your purposes. So some of these examples, I wrote some players down as some examples. And also I included some players maybe moving forward that could also fit this criteria. So as far as the undervalued, low valued players that we're looking for with future opportunities, some of those players we've seen recently have been Jalen Coker, Isaac Orendo, Jameis Winston. We all Jalen Coker, he was probably much more under the radar than the other two, but Isaac Orendo, we knew that behind CMC on the 49ers, he just needed an opportunity and his value would skyrocket. With his athleticism, his size in the 49ers running system, we knew that was just ready to happen at any moment. It was just if it would happen, but it wasn't going to cost you a lot to go get him. Jameis Winston, same thing. We knew Deshaun Watson was not good. Now, no one could have predicted a season-ending injury, but we knew that if Jameis Winston got an opportunity to start, he was probably going to score fantasy points and he would be valuable. If you had him, you probably could have flipped him for a second just a couple of weeks ago. Now, you probably have missed your window, which is something I want to talk about is you got to be quick to sell these players. If you get a Jameis Winston for a 3rd round pick, you sell him for a 2nd round pick. If you try to get greedy and hold on to him for a 1st round pick and you let a couple of weeks go by, you miss your window with these guys. Because like I said, most of these guys aren't going to turn out to be Puka Nacua who have holding power for years. A lot of these guys are flashes in the pan, so you got to get rid of them when you have the opportunity. Now, another set of these players, the criteria is undervalued veterans. And Mike, you had a great example of this just last offseason, not this past one, but 2 years ago, when you were talking about Adam Thielen, even for rebuilding teams, as a undervalued veteran that rebuilding teams could go after. At that point, you could get him for a third, fourth round pick when he had just left the Vikings and was just signed to the Panthers. And then he had an incredible season. You could have moved him easily for a second round pick, if not maybe a second and a third round pick in the season. So, looking for those players, we've seen recently Adam Thielen, Darnell Mooney, Cade Otton, Cortland Sutton, some of these undervalued veterans you could have picked up in the offseason and sold for more during the season. And to bring up a couple players moving forward that could fit under the undervalued veterans, Michael Pittman Jr., Travis Etienne, Demario Douglas. Those are three players that might be cheaper in the offseason because they've had years that they've really struggled this year. But, none of them are really that old. Demario Douglas also, I think, with some more offensive pieces around him, could do good. I'm a Demario Douglas fan, but
I know.
Those are three players there. And going back to the looking for future opportunities, three players I think that could fit that are pretty low valued: Troy Franklin, Roshan Johnson, and Daniel Jones. Because, hey, I know everyone loves to hate on Daniel Jones, but we saw what Sam Darnold did this year. You go find, if you have a rebuilding roster, Daniel Jones on your roster, you'll probably be able to flip him for more than you have to pay right now.
Yeah, true. And I did hear you mention Jameis Winston previously, right? I was looking for something.
Yep.
Yeah, and he's not starting this week. Dorian Thompson-Robinson.
No.
Forgive me.
Mr. Window.
Yeah, so it's one of those things. And, you mentioned Adam Thielen. Yeah, I did say him last year, and I wanted to add on to this, if you don't mind. Adam Thielen came in. He finished the season as wide receiver 30, but at one point in the season, he was a top 10 wide receiver. But he still finished 103 catches, 1,014 yards, and 4 touchdowns, 7.5 fantasy points per game. And another good example this year would have been a guy like J.K. Dobbins that you could have gotten pretty cheaply before the season started. Now his year is finished, but he still averaged 12.5 fantasy points per game. You could have moved him at some point to a contender, gotten a younger piece, blah, 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 obviously before he got hurt. So I love that. And I just, my whole thought here is, I think rebuilding, everyone always thinks youth draft picks. Sometimes I always say stockpile picks, and this is why it helps you get these guys. You could flip them for more later. So that's just one way to turn fourths into seconds, stuff like that. So one of my strategy, my first one here is staying active on the waiver wire. I just feel like while you're rebuilding, you should be one of the most active teams. You can't just let things come to you, because that's not how it works. You know what I mean? You're not a woman in the dating scene. Things don't just come to you. You're a guy or gal playing fantasy football. You got to make moves. You got to make it happen. Players you don't plan on playing, they could be flipped for draft capital, or you could end up being a contributor next season as well. I'll give you some examples here. Isaac Guerendo, maybe you drafted him. A lot of people did. A lot of people didn't too. Because they thought, oh man, he's buried. CMC is going to be fine. And then obviously that news broke. Jordan Mason was playing well, blah, blah, blah. But Guerendo, if you had picked him up, I found some trades for him. And these are recent trades too. 2 26 thirds, a 25 second, Guerendo and a 25 fourth for a 25 second and third. So, you're using a piece who you don't think is going to be a long-term contributor to come up. Stone Smart was a big guy on the waiver wire this past week. He went for a 26 third, Terry McLaurin.
That's crazy.
Smart for a 25 first, and Tommy Tremble. And another one here, and unfortunately, his first game as a starter didn't work out, but Sincere McCormick, if you plucked him off the waiver wire, 25 third, a 25 third and fourth, McCormick and a 27 fourth for Roshan Johnson and a 26 third. So it's one of those things where you just scoop these guys up. People get desperate. They have injuries. They have holes in their lineup. Those week 14 bye weeks were killer for a lot of people trying to make a playoff push. And to implement that, you just keep track of notable injuries, any players falling off and who their backups are. Just stay on ESPN's homepage, has a lot of good tidbits, maybe the NFL.com, Twitter, X, whatever it is. Our Patreon has a lot of NFL breaking news on it as well. We have a channel just for that. I've actually found a lot of stuff out there. Caleb Bowie's in there, like our own Adam Schefter, breaking stuff before I see it anywhere else. I don't know how he does it. So I don't know. But stay active on that waiver wire. But Nate, do you have a player for us that you want to talk about?
I do. And I think I talked about him a couple weeks ago, but I want to talk about him again because I think he's one of the best rebuilding buys right now. And he's not cheap, but I still think he's one of the best buys if you're a rebuilding team looking towards next year, looking towards the future. And that is Chicago Bears wide receiver Rome Odunze. This is a great player to build around. especially because next year's wide receiver class is not that strong.
Yeah.
We have kind of been spoiled with the last couple wide receiver classes. We've seen rookies come in and perform right away, and depth of the class as well. Next year, there's obviously going to be some good talent at the top. And there's some guys I'm really excited about: Ted McMillan, Luther Burden, Emeka Egbuka, Travis Hunter, depending on what he does at the next level position-wise. But after that, I start to get worried about the depth of the class and how many impact players we have from the get-go. So if you're a rebuilding team and you need to, build up that wide receiver depth, this coming class is not really the class to do that. There's going to be a lot of running backs in this class, which I'm really excited about. But if you need wide receivers, you need to go find them. And Rome Odunze is a player that you can build around. He can be a cornerstone piece moving forward, and pretty affordable for what I believe to be a cornerstone piece for the rest of your dynasty team. Now, according to Scott Barrett on Twitter, Odunze ranks 12th in air yards, but unfortunately, he ranks 49th in catchable air yards. The Bears have not had the deep ball this year. And it's a little bit on Caleb Williams. It's a little bit on that offense and how they've schemed things up. It's much on that offensive line for sure as well. But we have not seen the deep ball work for the Bears this year. But if Caleb and the Bears can unlock the deep ball, improve the deep ball, then Rome Odunze is going to take off next year. And I talked about it a couple podcasts ago, looking at JSN's season, looking at Rome Odunze's rookie season. Both these guys' rookie seasons have been very, very similar to where they are within 0.2 or 3 points of each other on a point per game basis. A lot of their stats look very similar up to this point in the season. And we can see now what JSN is doing this year and how he's taken over as the wide receiver one for the Seahawks and looks like a top 12 dynasty wide receiver. I think Rome Odunze has similar potential, is set up for a similar sophomore season next year. So I think he's one of the best buys you can get as a rebuilding team. And like I said, not super expensive at the moment. Bringing up some trades for Rome Odunze that have happened in the past couple of days. Rashad White and a second-round pick. Isaac Guerrero, Cortland Sutton, and Rico Dowdle. I know that feels like a lot of some trash for a treasure, but if you're a competing team, Rome Odunze is not helping you out a ton right now. Isaac Guerrero, Cortland Sutton, Rico Dowdle sure could. Yeah. We're going to talk about Rico Dowdle in the next podcast. I hope you're going to be listening to that one because he's been really good recently. We got to talk about that. And then another trade here: Sam Laporta, Tyreek Hill, and Jaden Reed for Rome Odunze and Garrett Wilson. Just another trade out there that you could make. I'm okay with either side, depending on what you're looking for. But if you want to get younger at the wide receiver position, I like that trade as well. So Rome Odunze, a great buy for rebuilding teams.
Looking for a pickup truck to get just about anything done? Look no further. The Chevy Silverado EV isn't just the most powerful Silverado ever, with next-level towing capability and technology. It also offers game-changing versatility with the available multi-flex midgate and tailgate, which means Silverado EV helps you carry large, bulky, and oddly shaped items up to nearly 11 feet in length. Chevrolet. Together, let's drive. Visit Chevrolet.com to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first, like to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
This year, Santa's bringing the power of Energizer into his workshop.
Whoa, the Energizer Bunny's got so much power.
Wait, he's powered up all the toys. I think that means we're done for the year.
I love this bunny.
He's the hardest working helper the North Pole has ever seen. And he wants all your gifts to have the power of the #1 longest lasting AA battery. So this holiday season, stock up on Santa's and the elves' favorite battery, Energizer Ultimate Lithium.
So, you want to be a marketer. It's easy. You just have to score a ton of leads and figure out a way to turn them all into customers. Plus, manage a dozen channels, write 1 million blogs, and launch 100 campaigns all at once. When that's done, simply make your socials go viral and bring in record profits. No sweat. Okay, fine. It's a lot of sweat. But with HubSpot's AI-powered marketing tools, launching benchmark-breaking campaigns is easier than ever. Get started at HubSpot.com/marketers.
Deck your home with Blinds.com. La 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 la. Blinds.com. DIY or let us install. La 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 la. Blinds.com. Free design consultation. Free. Plus free samples and free shipping. Free.
Head to Blinds.com now for up to 40% off site-wide, plus a free professional measure. Rules and restrictions may apply.
All right, Nate, I'm going to hit you back with another strategy now. I like to trade for young or youngish players that are currently sitting on injured reserve, contending teams that want to push. Yeah. And if you're not contending, you're basically exploiting a void on their team. It's going to help you win later. You're not trying to win now. And this is the best opportunity to get good, still younger players at a discount. I got a couple examples here for you. First one is Brandon Ayuk. Okay. You could go get Brandon Ayuk right now. And maybe you flip him later if you want to, because you're not going to get him for just the 26th first, a couple years out. Devontae Adams in a 25 fourth. Mm-hmm. Jalen Waddle for Brandon Ayuk in a 25 second. Another guy that I like, Chris Godwin. You can get him for Jonnu Smith in a 25 third. Jonnu Smith playing good, but he's been inconsistent throughout his career. Tony Pollard straight up. Or Joe Mixon for Godwin in a 25 second. Joe Mixon, an aging running back. Wide receivers typically play past 30. Another one is Rashee Rice. Jonnu Smith, again, everyone's just moving on from Jonnu. Jonnu Smith and Waddle for Rashee Rice. And Tyrone Tracy in a 25 third for Rashee Rice. And these trades happened. I didn't make these up. You guys did them. And to implement this, check out, just go on Sleeper, go on whatever app you use. Look at the playoff teams. See what holes they have in their lineup and see if you can find any mutually acceptable trades. Help them, help yourself, okay? Try to find some good trades for everybody, and this is a great time to unload older, yet still productive players that really aren't going to be a thing for you when you start to contend. This way guys don't age out on your roster.
Yeah. Mike, this kind of brings up a point I want to talk about real quick, because you're talking about, trading with these playoff teams. And there's plenty of leagues out there that have trade deadlines that have already passed, but there's also plenty of leagues where there is no trade deadline. Majority of my dynasty leagues do not have a trade deadline, and I like it that way.
I'm split. It depends on the league. Some do, some don't. And I'm fine with either way, however the commissioner wants to set it up.
I'm fine either way. I personally prefer no trade deadline. Because it is dynasty, and it just keeps us all involved. But I know one thing that people like to bring up when they're arguing for the trade deadline is that a team shouldn't be able to buy a championship. But I think that's a little exaggerated in actual practicality, because I'm in a league where I'm in a best ball league. It's a best ball dynasty league, and my brother. I'm the number 1 or 2 seed. I had to buy this week. My brother is in the playoffs, and he had to have a matchup this week. So he went ahead and he bought Alvin Kamara, Cooper Kupp in one deal. And then he had another deal where he went and bought a couple running backs as well, traded away a lot of his future. And he ended up losing. Didn't make it out of the first round.
Yeah.
That happens. This game is not a science. This game is not easy to predict. So if someone wants to go out there and mortgage the future for a chance this year, it's not always going to work out, and that is their prerogative. So I'm all for, maybe it's more libertarian to let people just trade throughout the season.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Trades don't always work. They backfire sometimes. Look at last year in Open to Suggestion, the league that Nate and I are both in. It's Devy League. It was my first Devy League. I was playing Kate Majuk in the finals. She traded for CMC. I'm like, man, crap. This is no good for me. And then I went ahead and I needed to make a move. Justin Herbert was on IR at the time or injured. Something I can't remember. This last year. And I traded him straight up for Jared Goff. I ended up winning. And she didn't. And look, for all purposes, trading for CMC going into the finals looked like it was going to work out, and it just didn't for her. So there's 2 examples right there of why the argument is you can't necessarily buy a championship. You just can't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I found the other deal. He also moved some pieces for TJ Hawkinson, Chase Brown, and Drake May in a pretty big trade, including 2 of his future firsts. So, this can happen. And also someone else in the playoffs who's also, they made it out of the first round, but they traded for David Montgomery.
Yeah.
That is just how it goes.
And David Montgomery done for the season now too. Yeah. So and look, I get it. And I see the argument both sides, but not an exact science over here. You never know who's going to get hurt. I'll tell you what, the Lions just getting banged up offensively and defensively. Going to be interesting to see how they recover. Nate, do you have another strategy for us?
I sure do. Once again, it's going to be looking at long-term value, kind of expanding on something I mentioned earlier is, as a rebuilding team, you are given the privilege of being able to look at next season, 2 seasons from now, and basing your value off of that, not necessarily basing your value off of how many points someone's going to score the rest of this season or how they've already performed this season. And if you're not going to be wheeling and dealing your way out of this rebuild, which you certainly can do if you live, you participate in a very active league, then your rebuilds can be much quicker. But some leagues aren't as active with trading. Some, it's a little bit harder to trade, and you have to kind of wait for your rebuild to get there. And the best way to do that is to have this long-term value focus in mind. And this goes back to, paying attention to the contracts, potential cap casualties, pending free agents, and looking at what's going to happen, down the road. But the biggest thing I think here is you get this long-term value by investing in draft picks that are down the road as well. Like right now, everyone's going to want 2025 draft picks in about 3 months.
Yeah.
And it's to the point now where teams already want 2025 draft picks if they're not in the playoffs. And if teams, have been eliminated in the first round, they don't care anymore. 2025 draft picks are where it's at. So there's a market, a very competitive market starting from this week moving forward for 2025 draft picks. But as a rebuilding team, if you're not looking to be competitive in 2025, your timeline may be more 2026, 2027. You have the ability to go and get the draft picks for 2026, 2027 and let them sit on your roster and gain value. You can kind of buy them at a discount right now because other people are trying to keep their team competitive or retool, but you have that ability to be a bit more patient. And patience can really be key in some of these rebuilds. Yes, you can rebuild a team in one season, you can turn it around, you can back on your feet. But sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years of hard work. And if you do it that way, sometimes you come out the other side with a much stronger team than if you just do that rebuild after just 1 year. And I think, trading for 2026 and 2027 picks over the next couple weeks, next couple months can be really valuable if you're a rebuilding team. Because, hey, I know we're excited about the running backs in this draft class, but the 2026 class is going to be really good. The 2027 class is going to be really good. There's so much talent coming out of the college ranks right now. And if you pay attention to the draft classes coming up and you listen to the Dynasty Rewind and you check out the Patreon content, you're going to know which of these classes coming up, which positional strengths they have and which positional weaknesses they have. And you can even kind of look at your future and strategize that way as well. Of course, we don't always know. Sometimes players go back for a 4th year. Sometimes other players break out that we don't know about just yet. But we already have an idea of what the next 3 draft classes look like. Just an idea, but you can build off of that idea and make sure that your team is going to be well-rounded. So I think right now, one thing that as a rebuilding team you can do is go after those draft picks that are more than a year away.
Yeah, especially if you need a quarterback. This quarterback class not looking great so far. Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, maybe Dylan Gabriel get some draft buzz playing out there for Oregon. But Drew Aller coming back for his senior year at Penn State. Pretty excited.
Garrett Nussmeier going back to LSU. Those were 2 players that people had talked about with first-round potential in this draft class. So 2026 class should look good. I'll tell you what, there's some really good true freshman quarterbacks this year or redshirt freshman quarterbacks this year. So the 2027 quarterback class could look really good as well. And, of course, 2027 is when we're going to have a ton of wide receiver talent come out. Jeremiah Smith, Ohio State, Ryan Williams at Alabama, Cam Coleman down at Auburn. So many good true freshman wide receivers this year. The 2027 class is going to be great.
Yeah. So last player for you, you've listened to me. You've played the waiver wire. You flipped for a lot of picks. You listened to Nate. You got picks for a couple years out. And now I'm going to tell you a player to go buy. And this is a shot in the dark because he's hurt. It's Minnesota Vikings quarterback J.J. McCarthy. I think he's likely going to be a starter next year. Now, I was doing some research. I did see some Minnesota Vikings fan blogs saying, hey, trade J.J. McCarthy, sign Sam Darnold long-term. Okay, I get it. Sam Darnold playing some of the best football of his career, and good for him. Honestly, good for you, Sam Darnold. Mm-hmm. Before the season, I said I wanted no part of the Minnesota Vikings passing game short of J.J. McCarthy. And look, I was wrong. And I'll admit that I was wrong on that. But did anyone really expect Sam Darnold to come out and play like this? I mean, look at what he's done throughout his career. Now, there's other possibilities too. Maybe they do that. I think J.J. McCarthy's a starter next year. So I said he's likely to start next year. I didn't say it was going to be in Minnesota. We hope it's in Minnesota for his sake. Throwing Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, Justin Jefferson, that would look good. But if not, if they do decide to extend Darnold, he's going to go somewhere. There's teams that need a quarterback. Maybe the Raiders don't want to draft Shedeur Sanders. Maybe he goes to the Giants. I don't know. The Jets. There's possibilities out there. Darnold's going to get the bag in free agency anyway, be it with the Vikings, be it somebody else. And look, if he doesn't stay, and maybe they re-sign Daniel Jones to a cheap deal to be that bridge until J.J. McCarthy's ready, shouldn't be long until, once JJ's ready, they're going to be like, all right, Dan, take a seat, buddy. So, like I said, regardless, he's a starter somewhere next year, in my opinion. What's it cost to get him? Look, if you're not a believer in Bryce Young long-term, be Bryce Young in a second. These are trades I saw, courtesy of Fantasy Calc. Ladd McConkey for J.J. McCarthy in a 27 first. Interesting one. And Justin Herbert for Mike McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy. Don't trade for Mike McCarthy, anybody. No. So Justin Herbert for J.J. McCarthy, Geno Smith, and a 26 second. And look, I kind of like this deal here a little bit. You're kind of maximizing. You're getting two quarterbacks. You're getting a future quarterback, a quarterback that can play right now, and a 26 second on top of it. So, although Geno Smith did get hurt, I haven't gotten an update on what that was going on with him on Sunday.
Yeah, it was a knee injury, but I haven't heard any more about what that knee injury is. I don't think it was anything too significant, but it's a knee injury, so you never know.
Okay. All right.
I do want to say one thing about the Vikings. I realized, I saw a tweet today, and I realize now with J.J. McCarthy likely to be the starter next year, if that happens, Jordan Addison will have had a different quarterback each season for the last 5 seasons.
That's
if it's J.J. McCarthy next year, it was Sam Darnold this year, Kirk Cousins the year before that, Caleb Williams the year before that, and Kenny Pickett the year before that. It's play with a lot of good quarterbacks, but new one each year.
Wow. Look at that. Interesting. So, all right, that's going to wrap it up for us on how to rebuild the right way. Thank you for hanging out with us. Pick up some merch. Link is down below. No matter how you're watching or listening, you can find that link, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Come try out a week on us for free. But until next time, for Nate, I'm Mike. Thanks for listening.